Welcome back to Sleepy Science History. I wonder, have you ever closed your eyes at night and asked yourself, what would happen if the sun, our brilliant companion in the sky, simply stopped shining? Would life end in a single breath? Or might there be quiet pockets of survival, hidden away in the folds of our strange little planet? I find myself asking these questions not in a fearful way, but with a kind of dreamy curiosity. After all, the sun feels eternal to us, doesn't it? It has risen every morning of our lives, painted the clouds with gold, warmed our skin, and grown our food. It is hard to imagine its absence. Yet here we are tonight, together, gently wondering, if the sun went dark, could life continue? And if so, what would it look like? Let's not rush. Let's just settle in. Maybe you're listening while lying in bed, your pillow soft, your room dimly lit. Maybe you're sipping tea in a quiet corner. Wherever you are, imagine yourself drifting with me, slowly, into this thought experiment. Let's walk together, step by step, into the shadow of a sunless earth. The first thing to ask is simple, but also unsettling. What would happen the very instant the sun went dark? Would we notice right away? Yes, we would, although not immediately. Light takes about 8 minutes to reach Earth. That means if the sun suddenly winked out, we'd still see it shining for a short while, as if the sky were playing a trick on us. Then, like a candle blown out in the distance, it would vanish. The last sunset, though we would not know it at the time, would already have passed. But beyond the light, what about the warmth? Could Earth hold on to any of its heat? Think about when you turn off an oven. The coils no longer glow, but the warmth lingers. For a little while you can still place your hands near it and feel the ghost of heat. Earth would be the same. The atmosphere, the oceans, the ground beneath our feet, they all hold warmth. Slowly, though, inexorably, they would give it away. Within days, the air would grow sharp with cold. Within weeks, oceans near the surface would begin to freeze. Within months, the world as we know it would be unrecognizable. And yet, does unrecognizable mean lifeless? Here's where the story takes a twist. We tend to think of the sun as the one and only source of life. Without its rays, photosynthesis would collapse, crops would wither, and forests would die. Surely, then, life could not continue? But hold on, let's look closer. Deep beneath the ocean's surface, there are places that have never seen sunlight. Entire communities of creatures, fish with ghostly pale skin, worms that shimmer with red plumes, crabs with sightless eyes, make their living not from sunlight, but from something else. They thrive on the heat and chemicals that pour out of hydrothermal vents, cracks in the seafloor where Earth's inner fire leaks into the ocean. Isn't that astonishing? Life that does not need the sun, life that asks no permission from the sky, but instead listens to the rumblings of the planet itself. So if the sun disappeared, these creatures would hardly notice. They would continue in their own strange rhythm, oblivious to the frozen wasteland above. Their ecosystems are powered not by light, but by chemistry, by the ancient furnace at Earth's core. Which leads to a beautiful question. Could we, fragile, sun-dependent humans, learn to do the same? Imagine, for a moment, humanity moving underground. Picture vast caverns glowing not with sunlight, but with gentle artificial lamps, powered by the deep heat of the earth. Imagine geothermal plants humming, like great underground hearts, drawing warmth from below. Could we, like the vent creatures, adapt to a sunless existence? It sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But parts of it are already real. Iceland, for instance, uses geothermal energy to heat homes and grow food in greenhouses, even through dark winters. We already know how to tap into Earth's warmth. The question is, could we do it on a global scale? Could entire cities burrow down, safe from the ice above, warmed by the glow of the planet's hidden fires? Would we want to? Would you? It is tempting to imagine the adventure of it, like living in a storybook world of caverns and glowing mushrooms, whole families thriving beneath stone ceilings. But then again, think of what we would lose. The skies, the trees, the gentle warmth of sunlight on your face. Could you bear a life without shadows cast on the ground, without sunrises and sunsets? Let's pause here for a breath. I don't want this to feel heavy. It's a thought experiment. After all, a way of stretching our imaginations. Sometimes, I find that exploring impossible questions makes the real world feel even more precious. So let's ask another. If the sun were gone, would Earth drift alone through the cosmos forever? Or could we, dreamers that we are, find a way to carry our home to another star? The idea sounds wild, but some scientists have played with it. Could we, over immense spans of time, build engines large enough to push the planet, ever so slowly, toward a new sun? Imagine Earth itself as a great ship, sailing across the galaxy, looking for a new hearth to orbit. It feels almost like mythology, doesn't it? Like an ancient tale, except told with equations instead of poetry. But maybe the two are not so different. Now let's return to the creatures of the deep. Picture them again. Blind shrimp dancing in scalding water, tube worms taller than a person, bacteria weaving food from nothing but sulfur and heat. They are a reminder that life is resilient, adaptable, often surprising. The sun may be our life giver, but perhaps not life's only giver. And what about you? If you were there, deep beneath the ocean, looking at those vent fields, would you not feel a strange comfort? To know that even if the skies went dark, something would still glow? I sometimes think of Earth itself as a layered book, each page telling a different story of survival. On the surface, we live by the sun. Beneath, some live by the fire of the earth. And who knows what stories are written deeper still, in places we have yet to discover. Isn't it curious how asking one frightening question can open a dozen hopeful ones? At first, the thought of losing the sun feels like the end of everything. But then, as we look closer, it begins to feel more like a shift, a change of chapter, not necessarily the last page. So tonight, as you rest, think of this. The sun is our great lantern, yes, but life may be more resourceful than we give it credit for. Darkness, instead of a grave, could be a beginning. And in the soft stillness of your room, with your eyes closing slowly, let the question linger. What hidden fires, what secret lights, might sustain us, even if the sky went dark? Sleep well, my friend. We'll keep asking together. What happens to a world when its rhythms are broken? Have you noticed how much of life beats to a pattern? Day and night, light and shadow, warmth and coolness? What if those patterns stopped? If Earth slipped into endless night, would life itself learn a new rhythm, or would silence fall instead? I think about this often. The sun is not just a lantern in the sky. It is a metronome. It keeps time for us. Plants rise and sleep by its light. Animals stir and rest according to its cycles. Even you and I, our bodies, our hormones, our moods, are tuned to its daily presence. Without the sun, the clock of life would shatter. What would replace it? Picture yourself waking up in a world where no dawn comes. You might wonder, how do you know when to sleep, when to wake, when to eat, when to work? The idea feels small compared to frozen oceans and dying forests, yet perhaps it is even more profound. To lose the sun is not just to lose warmth, it is to lose rhythm. Would we invent new ways to keep time? Artificial clocks, bells in underground cities, soft pulses of light to tell us when to rest? Could you trust such inventions? Or would your body ache for a rhythm it could no longer feel? It's a strange question. Can a person live without sunrise? The first to notice the missing rhythm would not be us, but the plants. Without sunlight, photosynthesis would falter. Green fields would turn gray. Leaves would wither. The great forests would slowly fall silent, their once busy branches bare. And yet, not all plants are helpless. Mushrooms, for instance, do not ask for sunlight. They thrive in dark forests and damp cellars, feasting not on light, but on decay. Imagine then, a future Earth where forests give way to fungi. Great fungal networks could spread, feeding on the remains of a fallen green world. Would humanity learn to live on mushrooms, cultivating them in caverns like bread in an oven? It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That in a sunless world, mushrooms might take the throne. But here's another twist. Not all sunlight is trapped on the surface. Life could seek warmth from the earth itself, deep down. Think of roots, tendrils of life pushing below the soil. Could new species evolve to burrow downward, chasing the gentle heat of the crust? Could seeds awaken in caverns, glowing faintly with bioluminescence, Trading green leaves for pale tendrils? Would we walk someday through forests underground? Not of trees, but of strange pale growths reaching toward cracks of warmth? Let's wander even deeper. Beneath the soil, below the rock, far into Earth's crust, there already exists a hidden biosphere. Scientists call it the deep biosphere, a world of microbes living miles below, feeding on minerals and chemical reactions. These tiny beings have no sunlight at all, yet they have survived for millions of years. Did you know that some of these microbes live so slowly that a single cell might divide only once in 1,000 years? Imagine a patience so profound that time itself feels irrelevant. Could such life be the true inheritor of a dark earth? Tiny, invisible, but enduring, unbothered by the fall of the sun? It raises a question for us. If life can thrive so quietly, so deeply, does survival need to be loud and green and visible? Or could the future belong to what is hidden? Now, let us ask something more daring. If the sun went dark, would the stars finally speak louder? Think about it. When you step outside at night in our world, you see a sky dotted with stars, but their light competes with the moon, with cities, with the memory of the day. In eternal darkness, the stars would blaze like lanterns across a velvet sea. Would humans find new rhythm in their patterns? Could constellations become our new calendar, guiding us not by sunrise but by stellar drift? Would we measure months by the slow wheel of galaxies overhead, years by the passing of comets? Could you imagine walking outside, wrapped in furs, the ground frozen, but above you a sky so clear, so rich with starlight, that it feels like a gift left in exchange for the sun? And then another thought. Would the moon still matter? Without the sun to shine on it, the moon would be invisible, a ghost stone circling unseen. Does it make you a little sad to think of it vanishing? A silent companion gone dark? Or maybe, just maybe, we would invent ways to light it ourselves. Could we, in defiance, place great mirrors or stations to keep the moon glowing, a lantern of our own making? Would we cling to it as a symbol, a reminder of cycles lost? It is strange how quickly these questions multiply. We began with survival, and now we are asking about beauty, about rhythm, about the poetry of the sky. But isn't survival more than just breathing and eating? Don't we also need stories, light, and meaning? Imagine an underground city. Food grows in hydroponic farms, powered by geothermal heat. People gather in halls carved from stone. It is safe, warm, functional. And yet, wouldn't there be a hunger not of the stomach, but of the soul? Would children ask, what is a sunrise? Would artists paint skies they have never seen? Could humanity survive the loss of the sun not just physically, but spiritually? This makes me wonder about memory. How long would we remember the sun? For the first few generations, people would still describe its warmth, its gold across oceans, its rise after stormy nights. But after 1,000 years? 10,000? Would the sun become myth, spoken of like a forgotten god? Would children laugh at the thought of a giant fire in the sky, finding it unbelievable? And if we did forget, would that be tragic or simply natural? Perhaps we underestimate ourselves. Humans are storytellers. After all, even in darkness, we invent light. Think of campfires, candles, lanterns, electric bulbs. Every invention of light is, in a way, a rehearsal for a world without the sun. We have always resisted the night. So maybe, just maybe, we would not despair. We would gather in caves and cities, telling tales, lighting artificial dawns each morning, refusing to let the rhythm die. Could it be that the true strength of life is not just adaptation, but imagination? But what about the rest of life? Could animals adapt? Some creatures already live in caves. Blind fish, pale insects, bats navigating by sound. Could evolution guide more species into the dark? Over thousands of years, could foxes grow pale fur? Owls larger eyes? Whales perhaps even return to hydrothermal coasts, feeding in ventlit seas? Would the planet become a theater of ghosts? White, sightless, whispering beings, all tuned to darkness? Would we, too, become pale and nocturnal, our eyes widening, our skin fading, our voices softer? And still, the question lingers. Is survival enough? If humanity endured, tucked away underground or beneath ice, would we call that living? or merely waiting? Perhaps the real question is not could life survive without the sun, but what kind of life would it be? Would we feel content, sipping mushroom soup in geothermal kitchens? Or would we ache forever for the warmth of dawn? Would you? Let's not hurry to answer. Some questions are better left lingering, like music echoing softly in a quiet hall. So I ask you to imagine yourself now, lying in the dark, not afraid, just thoughtful. What rhythms guide you? Is it the sun outside, or the quiet clock of your own heartbeat? If the sun were gone, would you still find a rhythm to follow? Maybe, just maybe, you already carry a small sun inside you. Have you ever wondered how long warmth can linger? When a fire burns out, the ashes still hold a faint glow, a breath of heat that slowly fades. Could Earth, too, keep such an ember if the sun were gone? I think of this often. Our planet is not only warmed from above, but also from within. Deep beneath our feet lies a furnace, the molten heart of Earth. Could that hidden fire become our savior in the absence of the sun? Let's wander carefully into this thought, like travelers stepping into a cave lit only by a single torch. The heat inside Earth is ancient. Some of it comes from the very birth of the planet, when cosmic dust clumped together and collided with furious energy. Some comes from radioactive elements still decaying slowly, atom by atom, whispering warmth into the stone. This heat seeps outward, gently, through rock and water, and sometimes bursts forth in geysers, volcanoes, and vents. It is easy to forget that Earth glows inside. We do not see it, but we feel its traces. Hot springs on a cold morning, steam rising from volcanic soil, the ground shaking with hidden movement. So the question becomes, could this inner warmth be enough? Imagine a world turned icy above, but alive below. Picture tunnels carved into stone, chambers warmed by geothermal wells. Families gather in underground kitchens, the air damp but cozy, steam rising from pipes in the walls. Outside, the surface is frozen, winds sharp and merciless, but underground life hums on. Would we learn to make our homes like the vent creatures of the sea, building communities not around sunlight, but around heat from the earth? Could we see our planet not as a ball orbiting the sun, but as a hearth in itself, a living furnace that cares for us? But then another question. How much heat does Earth truly have to give? It leaks slowly, like a lantern with only so much oil. The deeper you go, the warmer it becomes, but the cost of reaching that warmth is high. Could we, as a species, learn to tap into it widely, safely, endlessly? Or would our greed exhaust it, leaving us shivering in darkness once again? Would survival depend not just on what the planet offers, but on our restraint? And what of the oceans? Could they cradle warmth long enough for life to persist? Even without the sun, oceans would not freeze solid overnight. Ice would seal the surface like a lid, but below, in the deeper waters, warmth from the earth could keep liquid alive. Imagine seas hidden under ice, dark but not dead, teeming with strange fish and drifting creatures glowing with their own light. Could Earth become, in time, like Europa, Jupiter's moon, an icy shell over secret oceans? Could we adapt to a world where life retreats below, thriving in hidden seas while the land above sleeps forever under frost? Would humanity send submarines beneath the ice, turning oceans into our last gardens? And then comes the thought of energy. Without sunlight, where would power come from? Geothermal heat is one answer, yes. But could we also turn to the atom? Nuclear energy already burns in human hands, a mimicry of the stars themselves. Could reactors, humming like artificial suns, keep our cities alive? It raises a tender but serious question. Would we become more careful, more reverent of such power, if it were our only hope? Or would desperation push us toward mistakes? Could humanity handle the weight of being its own sun? Sometimes, I imagine Earth itself as a great ship adrift in darkness, its passengers huddled close to the engine room. The sun was once our captain, steering us with warmth and light, but now it is gone. Could we learn to steer for ourselves? Could the engine room, the molten heart of Earth, be enough to carry us through? Or would the ship slowly cool, drifting silent, its passengers fading into history? But survival is not only about heat. It is about food. How would we eat in a world without sunlight? At first, we would turn to what we have stored. Grains, seeds, preserved goods. But those would not last forever. We would need new ways to grow. Hydroponic farms could help, with artificial light powered by geothermal or nuclear energy. Mushrooms could flourish in underground chambers. Bacteria and algae might be harnessed, engineered to grow without sunlight, fed instead by chemicals and heat. Can you picture it? Farms glowing with gentle lamps, crops rising in water trays, harvests of pale vegetables and luminous fungi, meals cooked not from sunlit fields but from caverns warmed by hidden fires? Would food taste the same? Would it matter? I wonder if we might come to love those underground farms. Just as today we love greenhouses in winter, glass shelters filled with warmth and growth. Perhaps future humans would find beauty in caverns of life carved from rock. Perhaps a tomato grown in the dark, nurtured by human ingenuity, would feel even more precious than one ripened in the sun. Could survival give us new kinds of gratitude? Still, the question persists. How many could live this way? Could billions survive underground, warmed by Earth's heat, fed by artificial farms? Or would humanity shrink, reduced to small pockets, scattered enclaves of survivors holding on? And if only a few endured, what would that mean for the future of our species? Would cultures collapse? Languages fade? Histories vanish? Would we become whispers, scattered in the stone, each group inventing its own myths to explain the eternal night? Would survival feel like victory or like exile? And yet, life has endured worse. Remember, Earth has known mass extinctions before. Asteroids, ice ages, volcanic winters. Each time, life has found a way, though it often looks different afterward. Could the loss of the sun be simply another chapter in that story? A brutal chapter? Yes, but not the last? Perhaps humans would adapt not only physically, but culturally. Perhaps new art, new songs, new philosophies would emerge from the dark. Imagine poems written about geothermal wells, hymns sung to underground rivers, dances performed in echoing caverns. Would we, even in survival, still find ways to create beauty? Would you? There's another question, quieter but haunting. Would the loss of the sun make us finally look inward? For so long, we have looked to the skies for meaning, stars, gods, destinies. Without the sun, perhaps our gaze would turn instead to the earth itself, to its core, its warmth, its endurance. Could we learn to honor the ground beneath us, to see it as sacred, not just as stone but as the very source of our survival? Could darkness teach us to love the earth more deeply? I find it calming to imagine that. Not a bleak apocalypse, but a humbling shift, a return to the hidden hearth within our planet, a chance to remember that even without the sun, we are not alone. Earth itself is alive, patient, warm at its heart. So maybe the question is not, could life survive without the sun? But, could life survive with the earth alone? And the answer, whispered gently, seems to be yes, at least for a while. And yet, another layer unfolds. If life can endure within Earth, hidden and quiet, then perhaps this tells us something profound about the universe. Perhaps life elsewhere, on distant planets, does not need suns as we imagine. Perhaps there are worlds adrift in darkness, their surfaces frozen but their hearts warm, sheltering oceans and microbes and maybe even civilizations beneath. Could it be that the galaxy is full of hidden life, glowing softly in the dark, unnoticed because we only look for light? Isn't that a comforting thought, that even in the loneliest reaches of space, life might still be thriving unseen, in the warmth of hidden cores? So tonight, as you let your thoughts wander, think of Earth not just as a planet orbiting the sun, but as a lantern in its own right. Its light is slow, deep, unseen, but it is there, beneath your feet. What hidden warmth do you carry inside you? Could it be enough to sustain you in your own dark moments, just as Earth sustains life in its shadow? Perhaps the sun is not the only giver of life. Perhaps warmth, in all its forms, is more abundant than we realize. What does it mean to lose the sky? Not just its light, but its color, its patterns, its moods. Imagine standing on Earth's surface with no sun above, no blue arch stretching into distance, no clouds glowing with gold at dawn or burning red at dusk. Would the world feel smaller without the endless ceiling of the sky? Or would it feel infinite? An endless black canvas overhead, too vast to measure? We rarely think about how much the sky shapes us. It is a stage on which seasons play, a mirror for weather, a calendar for time. Without it, how would we measure life? Would you miss the blue the most? Or the way the horizon glows after rain? The first days without a sun would bring confusion. The air would darken, the familiar cycle of day and night erased. Even before the cold became unbearable, the absence of color would weigh on the heart. We are creatures who look up, who watch clouds for signs of rain, who measure moods in sunlight, who dream with stars. Could humanity learn to live without looking up? Perhaps we would invent artificial skies, caverns painted with soft light, domes projecting shifting clouds, ceilings that mimic the rhythm of a lost Sunday. Could such inventions comfort us? Or would they feel like imitations? Masks over a truth too heavy to bear? Would you step into a simulated dawn, knowing it was not real, and still feel your spirit lift? And then there is the question of stars. In the sun's absence, they would shine sharper, steadier. For the first time in history, the Milky Way might blaze constantly overhead, unchallenged by daylight. Could we learn to love that sky instead? A sky of endless night, jeweled with galaxies? Would children born in such a world no wonder not in the rising of the sun, but in the never-ending sea of stars? Would they ask, why did people ever need the sun at all, when we have this? It is strange, isn't it, to imagine beauty born from absence? But beauty alone cannot warm us. The cold would deepen, winds would cut sharper, frost would spread across soil, rivers would stiffen into glass. We would no longer measure days by light, but by the creeping chill. So the question rises, how long could we remain above ground? Would some cling to the surface, determined to see the stars, even as temperatures dropped? Could you imagine families wrapped in layers of fur and fabric, fires burning through the night, refusing to retreat underground until the last possible moment? Would that stubbornness be courage or denial? In the long view, survival would belong to those who moved below. Cities carved in stone, warmed by geothermal vents, lit by human ingenuity. And yet, even in those safe depths, I imagine a restlessness. People would still long for a sky. Might we carry fragments of it with us? Paintings of dawn, recordings of storms, memories passed down like sacred relics? Would the image of a blue sky become a kind of prayer, spoken not to gods, but to history itself? Or would memory fade, the way myths fade, until the sky became no more than a legend, unbelievable to those who never saw it? This brings me to time. Without the sun, how would we mark it? Our calendars, our clocks, our seasons, they all hinge on sunlight. Crops are planted by it, holidays tied to it, sleep guided by it. Remove the sun, and you remove the rhythm of existence. Would we find new rhythms in the underground world? Perhaps bells would ring every 12 hours to call people to meals, or lamps would brighten and dim in cycles to imitate days. Perhaps our bodies would slowly learn to follow new patterns, guided not by the heavens but by technology. Would you trust such rhythms? Or would you always feel something missing, like a heartbeat slightly out of sync? There's another thought. What happens to seasons? Without the sun, summer and winter vanish. No more thawing springs or golden harvests. No more snow glittering beneath morning light. The tilt of Earth's axis would still exist, but with no sunlight to tilt toward, the meaning is gone. How strange it would feel to live in a world without seasons, where time does not flow in cycles but stretches endlessly forward in sameness. Would humanity miss the joy of autumn leaves, the promise of spring blossoms, the anticipation of summer storms? Would life, without seasons, feel dull, or would it feel eternal? And then comes the question of memory again. How much would we cling to old traditions? Would families still celebrate a new year, though there is no sun to mark it? Would people still tell stories of spring and winter, planting seeds in the dark just to remember the past? Would nostalgia keep us alive, or would it hurt too much, forcing us to let go? Beyond memory, though, lies imagination. Could humans learn to create new rituals, new stories for a sunless world? Perhaps we would celebrate the glow of geothermal vents, the hum of reactors, the safety of warm caverns. Perhaps new myths would arise, not of sky gods, but of earth gods, guardians of the deep heat that keeps us alive. Can you picture children gathered around fires, listening to tales of the great furnace beneath the crust? The eternal flame of Earth itself? Could we learn to see our planet not just as home, but as protector? Maybe losing the sun would finally teach us to look inward, not outward. And yet, a quiet question lingers. Would the loss of the sun make us lonelier? Stars may shine brighter, but they are far away. The sun was close, intimate, almost like a companion. Its warmth touched skin, its light filled eyes, its cycles guided days. Without it, would we feel abandoned, adrift in a universe that suddenly seems colder and emptier? Would humanity feel like an orphan child, left without its parent star? But perhaps loneliness could also inspire us. Could it drive us to reach outward, to seek new suns? Maybe the absence of our own would make us hungrier to travel, to find warmth elsewhere. Could darkness, instead of ending us, propel us into the stars? Would the loss of the sun be tragedy, or the beginning of exploration? Sometimes I wonder if we misunderstand survival. We imagine it only as eating, breathing, avoiding death. But survival is also meaning. Without meaning, without wonder, can a species truly live? So maybe the real challenge of a sunless Earth is not heat or food, but spirit. Could we find beauty in artificial skies, joy in new rituals, meaning in hidden fires? Could we live not just in body, but in heart? Could you? Close your eyes now and picture it. A cavern city glowing softly, families gathered under lamps that dim and brighten in cycles, children learning to count not by days but by light shifts. Above them, the frozen surface lies silent, the sky black and endless, stars burning like unblinking eyes. Is it terrifying or strangely peaceful? Perhaps it is both. And as the thought lingers, so does the question. If life can adapt to such a world, does that not mean we are more resilient than we realize? That even without the sun, the rhythms of existence, though changed, could still carry on? Maybe the loss of the sky is not the end of wonder, but the opening of a new kind. What would become of the oceans if the sun no longer touched them? Have you thought about how strange it is that most of our planet is water, and yet we know the surface better than the depths? The seas are like vast mirrors for the sky, glittering under sunlight. But if the sky were dark forever, those mirrors would break. The water would no longer sparkle. The surface would harden with ice. And beneath? What secrets might awaken when the ocean sleeps under a frozen lid? Would the oceans die with the sun, or would they begin a new story in the dark? The surface would freeze first. Yes. Waves stiffening into stillness, spray turning to frost before it touched the ground. In time, entire oceans would wear icy shells, stretching for miles. But water is stubborn. Beneath that frozen lid, the deeper layers would linger in liquid form, warmed not by the sun, but by the earth itself. Imagine that, oceans hidden under ice, vast and silent, moving in currents that no storm above can touch. Wouldn't that feel almost like another planet? And perhaps, in a way, Earth would become one. Already, we know of such worlds. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, hides a liquid sea beneath its frozen crust. Enceladus, circling Saturn, sprays plumes of water into space from a buried ocean. Scientists wonder if life might exist there, warmed by tidal forces and chemical reactions. So if Earth's seas froze over, perhaps it would join their company. A planet of hidden oceans, secret ecosystems glowing faintly in the dark. Could Earth, robbed of sunlight, learn to mirror its distant cousins among the stars? And could we, humans, learn to live alongside those hidden waters? Picture yourself standing on the frozen surface of what was once the Pacific Ocean. The horizon is no longer shifting waves, but a white plain stretching endlessly. Beneath your feet lies miles of ice, and beneath that, a sea still alive. Could you feel the weight of it? The presence of life, unseen, moving quietly below? Would that thought comfort you, or chill you further? The creatures of the deep already live without sunlight. Lanternfish, giant squid, pale jellyfish. They thrive where light has never touched. Many of them make their own glow, tiny lanterns flickering in endless night. Could these creatures become the dominant heirs of Earth's oceans in a sunless age? Perhaps even evolving further, filling the darkness with forests of bioluminescence, entire reefs that sparkle like stars. Would the seas below ice become a mirror to the skies above, glowing with constellations of their own? Wouldn't it be beautiful to stand on frozen ground and know that below, galaxies of light swim silently in the water? But then we must ask, what of us? Could humans learn to survive from the oceans once the sun is gone? At first, the answer seems bleak. Fisheries would collapse. The frozen surface would make sailing impossible. But beneath the ice, where geothermal heat keeps currents alive, life would continue. Could we learn to drill through, to harvest food from those hidden ecosystems? Could submarines become our new farms, carrying us to places where life still stirs? And if so, what would it mean for culture? Would seafaring nations, once defined by ships and sails, be reborn as nations of divers and submersibles, tending to farms beneath the frozen sea? Could we, in time, become a species of ocean dwellers? There's another thought. The frozen surface of the oceans could become not only a challenge, but a gift. Ice, after all, is strong. It could serve as foundation for new kinds of settlements, cities built upon the frozen seas, stable platforms that never drift, never sink. Can you imagine walking through streets on top of what was once open water? The ice below holding entire worlds of life, unseen but present? Would living there feel like floating forever, or like standing on a grave? Perhaps both. The oceans, even under ice, might also be our lifelines for energy. Where tectonic plates meet, hydrothermal vents pour out heat and chemicals, feeding not only strange creatures but potential human ingenuity. Could we harness those vents, building stations to draw power and warmth from the seafloor? Could the oceans become our new power plants, silent furnaces hidden beneath frozen shells? Would you feel safe, knowing your light bulb above is powered by fire beneath the waves? Or would you always feel uneasy, connected by invisible threads to the restless sea? And here is a stranger possibility. Could we learn not only to survive from the oceans, but to live within them? Humans are land-bound creatures. Yes, but we have always dreamed of living beneath the waves. Perhaps, in the absence of the sun, we would finally commit to it. Domes and habitats sunk into the ocean, warmed by vents, lit by lamps, surrounded by glowing creatures. Entire civilizations moving like fish among the currents, far below the frozen shell. Would such a life feel alien, or would it feel like a return? A slow drifting back to where all life began. For wasn't the ocean our first home, billions of years ago? Still, the question of food lingers. What would we eat in such a world? The answer might lie in the simplest of beings: microbes. In the deep sea, some microbes thrive not on sunlight but on chemical reactions. They feed on hydrogen sulfide, methane, iron. Entire ecosystems spring from their work. Could we, too, learn to cultivate such life, farming not wheat or corn but colonies of microbes, turning them into food? It sounds unappealing, doesn't it? A meal grown from chemicals in the dark. And yet, perhaps in that future, such meals would be considered delicacies, crafted with care, flavored with memory. Would survival reshape not just what we eat, but how we think about food? Would we still celebrate meals, even if they came from darkness? There's another layer to consider: the silence. Oceans without the sun would grow still. No storms, no waves, no crashing surf. The frozen lid would mute everything. What would it feel like to stand at the edge of such an ocean? To hear no roar, no rhythm, only silence stretching out across ice? Would it be peaceful, like standing in a cathedral of frost, or unbearable, like listening to the world hold its breath? And if silence became the new ocean's voice, would we learn to love it? Sometimes I wonder if Earth's oceans would, in time, forget the sun entirely. Life within them would adapt, evolve, change. Fish that once swam by light would vanish, replaced by creatures born to darkness. Reefs of coral might collapse, but new structures, perhaps built by fungi, bacteria, or glowing colonies, might rise instead. The oceans would not die. They would simply transform. So perhaps the better question is not, would the oceans survive? But what kind of oceans would they become? Would they still be oceans as we know them? Or something stranger? Something new? And then, a thought drifts in. Perhaps the frozen oceans could protect us. Above ground, the air would thin, radiation from space would intensify, meteors would strike unchecked. But below the ice, the oceans would shield life, holding warmth, blocking radiation, preserving ecosystems even as the surface fell silent. Could the oceans become Earth's last refuge, its hidden sanctuary? Wouldn't it be ironic that the waters we once feared, wild, stormy, dangerous, might become our safest shelter? So tonight, think of the oceans not as endless blue waves under sunlight, but as dark, hidden worlds beneath ice. Think of glowing creatures drifting like lanterns in the currents, of ecosystems humming quietly with no need for the sky. Think of humanity carving tunnels through ice, building habitats beneath, finding food in the smallest of beings. Would such a world be bleak or wondrous? Perhaps, like all things, it would be both. What would happen to the air we breathe if the sun went dark? It feels like such a simple question. Yet the air is something we rarely notice, precisely because it is always there. Invisible, gentle, constant. We trust it without thinking. But without the sun, would even the sky itself betray us? The atmosphere, as it is now, is a careful balance. The sun warms the ground warms the air, and currents rise and fall in endless dance. Winds are born from sunlight. Clouds form as water evaporates, lifted into the sky. Without the sun, this dance would stumble. The winds would falter, the clouds would thin, the cycle of rain would break. Would Earth grow silent not only in light, but in air? Could you imagine stepping outside into a world where the wind no longer moves, where trees no longer sway, where the sky is still a stone? Breath itself depends on sunlight. Plants and algae take in carbon dioxide and, through photosynthesis, release oxygen. Without the sun, this process halts. Trees would weaken, forests would wither, oceans would lose their bloom of plankton. Slowly, inevitably, the air would change. The thought is chilling. Not only cold would stalk us, but suffocation. What would we do if the very breath in our lungs began to thin? Perhaps we would learn to make our own air. Artificial photosynthesis, machines splitting water into oxygen and hydrogen, factories maintaining the balance of gases. Could we, like gardeners, tend the atmosphere itself, trimming and feeding it as if it were a fragile plant? Would you feel safe knowing each breath you took depended on machines, that if they faltered, the world would close in around you? Or would you learn to trust them, to see them as companions in survival? There is something humbling in this thought, the realization that air is not permanent. We think of it as infinite, boundless, but it is a system, delicate and dependent on light. Without the sun, the atmosphere would become another thing we must cultivate, protect, and renew. Would humanity grow more reverent toward air, treating each breath as a gift, not a given? And what of weather? The absence of the sun would end the great cycles of evaporation and storm. Rain would falter, snow would cease, rivers would freeze, and the great wheel of water would stop turning. Could you imagine a world where no rain ever falls? Where no storm ever breaks the silence? At first, it might seem peaceful. No hurricanes, no floods, no destructive winds. But in truth, it would be emptier, lonelier. The drama of the sky would be gone. Would you miss the sound of rain against the window? The thrill of thunder rolling across the horizon? Would silence become unbearable without the music of storms? If humanity moved underground, would we create new kinds of weather for ourselves? Artificial rain in cavern farms, misting systems to mimic dew, perhaps even thunder recorded and replayed as comfort. Would we invent the sound of rain just to soothe our memories of it? Could such echoes of the sky ever replace the real thing? And then comes the question of color. Without sunlight, the blue of the atmosphere would vanish. The sky would no longer scatter light, no longer wrap the world in hues of dawn and dusk. It would simply be black, an eternal night. Would humanity miss color? Not just blue skies, but the warmth of sunsets, the golden hour when everything glows soft and alive. Could we learn to paint those colors ourselves, filling our homes and caverns with light that shifts through the spectrum, giving us the illusion of dawn and dusk? Would you believe in an artificial sunset if it washed across your walls? Or would you feel the ache of knowing it was not real? Even sound might change. The air, growing colder and thinner, would carry vibrations differently. Voices might sound strange outdoors, fainter, more brittle. Music might lose some of its resonance. Would songs feel lonelier, drifting in thin air that no longer cradles their notes? Or would music adapt, becoming quieter, slower, suited to the silence of a sunless world? I wonder about the animals that breathe with us. Birds, for example, creatures of the sky, their lives entwined with air. Without winds to carry them, without forests to feed them, without warmth to lift them, would they vanish? The sky without birds would be emptier still. No wings cutting across clouds, no dawn chorus of song. Would humanity feel that loss more deeply than the loss of warmth, more keenly than the fading of crops? Would silence weigh heavier than cold? And yet, perhaps not all would be lost. Bacteria, hardy and adaptable, might still thrive in the atmosphere's hidden corners. Deep caves might shelter oxygen-producing algae, clinging on in geothermal pools. Humanity, with effort, could cultivate these survivors, weaving them into air recycling systems. Could life find a way to keep breathing, even in the dark? Another question: would the air remain safe to breathe at all? As temperatures drop, carbon dioxide could condense, water vapor could freeze, chemicals could shift their states. Would our familiar mix of gases change in ways we do not expect? Would the atmosphere grow hostile, not just thin but toxic? Could we adapt, building masks and filters, carrying air with us as astronauts do in space? Could Earth itself become like a vast spacecraft, its surface unlivable, its people moving in sealed habitats, breathing manufactured air? Would we, in time, forget what it feels like to breathe freely beneath the open sky? It makes me think of gratitude. How often do you notice your breath? In and out, effortless, invisible. How often do you stop to realize it is sunlight, trees, oceans, and cycles of air all working together to let you live? Without the sun, each breath would be work, each inhalation earned by technology and struggle. Would that make us more grateful or more weary? Would you find comfort in a single breath, knowing how much effort went into making it possible? And then, the deepest question. If the sun is gone, if the air changes, if breathing itself becomes fragile, would life still be worth living? It is easy to think of survival in terms of food, heat, and shelter, but breathing is so intimate, so constant, that its fragility strikes differently. Could you find joy in a world where every breath reminded you of loss? Or would you, in time, learn to see each breath as an act of defiance, a quiet victory against darkness? There is something poetic in this. The idea that air, invisible and unnoticed, could become the most precious treasure of all. Perhaps in a sunless world, people would gather not to celebrate harvests or holidays, but to honor breath. Festivals of air, where oxygen is shared freely, where people sing and listen to the strange thin notes of music in cold atmospheres. Could survival reshape even celebration, turning the act of breathing itself into ritual? I imagine children in underground cities learning that air must be made, tended, protected. They would never know the careless joy of running outdoors without thought, lungs filling with invisible abundance. For them, breathing would always be conscious, mindful. Would such children grow wiser, more careful, more reverent toward the world? Or would they envy us, the last generation to breathe sunlight-fed air without thinking? And still, the earth would keep breathing, in its own way. Geysers would vent steam, volcanoes would sigh, vents on the ocean floor would exhale chemicals. The planet itself is alive with breath, even without the sun. Perhaps, in time, humanity would learn to synchronize with this deeper rhythm, breathing not with forests and fields, but with the hidden lungs of the earth. Wouldn't that be a kind of poetry? To become one with the breath of the planet itself? So as the thought lingers, ask yourself, how aware are you of your breath right now? How precious does it feel? In this moment, knowing how fragile it truly is, could you carry that awareness with you, even when the sun still shines? Maybe the lesson of imagining a sunless world is not despair, but gratitude for the breath you take, unnoticed, every moment of your life. What would happen to human society if the sun were gone? It's easy to imagine the physical consequences. Ice spreading across the land, crops dying, oceans sealing beneath frost. But what of us, the people who depend not only on warmth and food, but on each other? Would families stay close or drift apart? Would cultures grow richer in adaptation, or collapse under the weight of despair? Could humanity itself survive, not just in body, but in spirit? Imagine the first years after darkness falls. Panic, confusion, government scrambling, people clinging to the last glow of a world they once knew. There would be chaos, no doubt. But then, slowly, society would begin to change. Communities would gather underground, carving out warmth in the stone. Cities would shrink inward, but perhaps, strangely, they would grow closer. Would we become more communal, bound tightly together out of necessity? Or would scarcity fracture us, turning neighbor against neighbor? What kind of people would you choose to be if survival demanded both sharing and sacrifice? Families, too, would transform. Children would be born who never saw the sun, who would grow up hearing stories of blue skies and fields of green as if they were myths. Parents would paint those skies in words, perhaps even in murals on cavern walls, to keep memory alive. Would those children believe such stories, or would they laugh, imagining their elders as dreamers clinging to fantasy? Could you raise a child in such a world, knowing they would never run beneath an open sky? Would you tell them about the sun, or spare them the sorrow of longing for what is gone? Rituals would change as well. Our current holidays follow the sun, solstices, harvest festivals, even the turning of the year. In a sunless world, what would we celebrate instead? Perhaps the lighting of geothermal vents, the anniversary of a reactor powering on, the cycles of artificial farms. Perhaps new myths would form, not around a golden orb above, but around the hidden furnace of the earth below. Would humanity invent new gods for the darkness? Guardians of warmth, keepers of air, spirits of the deep stone? And would these myths give us comfort, the way sunlight once did? Art would change too. Imagine painters working not with daylight but with artificial lamps, their colors forever touched by shadow. Imagine musicians writing not for open air, but for caverns where echoes stretch songs into haunting harmonies. Imagine poets speaking of silence, of frost, of breath itself as the most sacred of gifts. Would creativity dim without the sun, or burn brighter in defiance of the dark? Wouldn't you want to hear the music of such a world? Slow, echoing, filled with longing? And what of governance? Would nations matter in a world without sunlight, or would humanity divide instead by regions of warmth, by access to geothermal wells, by proximity to underground food? Perhaps countries as we know them would fade, replaced by networks of survival enclaves. Would leaders rise as guardians of resources, or as tyrants hoarding them? Would democracy survive underground, or would survival demand stricter rule? Could freedom live in the dark, or would survival eclipse it? There is a haunting thought. Without the sun, war might not end. Even in scarcity, humans may fight for warmth, for food, for control. Caverns might be guarded like kingdoms, tunnels turned into borders. But perhaps the opposite is also possible. Perhaps the loss of the sun would humble us, teaching us that division is folly when all of humanity faces the same night. Would you hope for unity, or expect conflict? Education, too, would take on new weight. What would children study in a world without the sun? Surely survival skills, geothermal engineering, hydroponic farming, artificial air systems. But would we still teach astronomy? Still tell stories of the stars? Would mathematics and philosophy still matter when every resource is scarce? Could humanity keep its curiosity alive, or would practicality consume it? And yet, maybe curiosity would grow stronger, sharper. Perhaps children would look to the stars above the frozen surface and dream of escaping, of finding another sun to call home. Could that longing drive exploration, even in the midst of hardship? Think, too, about love in a world of darkness. Courtship beneath lamps instead of sunsets. Weddings held in caverns lit with bioluminescent fungi. Lovers speaking not of moonlight walks, but of warmth shared in the cold. Would romance survive without the sun? Or would it flourish even more fiercely, a flame burning defiantly against the night? And then there is grief. How would humanity mourn the sun? Would there be ceremonies, global vigils, a collective farewell? Or would people avoid speaking of it, burying the memory because it hurts too much? Perhaps there would be shrines built underground, where paintings of the sun glow under lamplight, and people gather to whisper their longing. Or perhaps there would be silence, a refusal to honor what cannot return. Would you remember with tenderness, or try to forget? Over time, new cultures would form. Languages would evolve, shaped by survival needs. Words for dawn and noon might fade, replaced by light shift and dark shift. Proverbs would change, no more make hay while the sun shines, but perhaps guard the fire, for it guards you. Would you recognize such a culture? Or would it feel alien, born of darkness and necessity? I wonder about identity, too. So much of who we are comes from the land, the climate, the seasons of our home. Without the sun, those anchors vanish. Could we still say we are people of the desert, of the tropics, of the plains? Or would all humans become simply people of the dark, stripped of regional identity? Would the loss of the sun erase the diversity of humanity, or reveal new kinds of culture never seen before? Even play would change. Children could not run freely in open fields, but they might invent games in tunnels, racing through caverns, playing with echoes, building worlds in artificial light. Could joy survive in such places? I think it would. Children are resilient. After all, even in the darkest of times, they find laughter. Wouldn't that be the most powerful sign of survival? Not farms or reactors, but the sound of children laughing in the dark? And what of faith? Some would surely see the loss of the sun as the end of days, a punishment, a closing of history. Others would see it as a test, a chance to prove humanity's resilience. New religions might rise, worshipping not the absent sun, but the enduring earth, the hidden fire, the stars above. Would faith become stronger in the dark, or would it wither with the fading of light? Would you find comfort in belief, or in reason, or in both? In the deepest sense, I wonder whether society would find balance. Humans are adaptable, yes, but we are also restless. Could we truly learn to live underground, in caverns and tunnels, forever cut off from the surface? Or would we always feel the pull of the frozen world above, the longing for skies we cannot have? Would we survive content, or survive yearning? Perhaps that is the real heart of the question. Survival is not only about endurance, it is about meaning. If humanity loses the sun but keeps its spirit, its love, its art, its hope, then perhaps we will not just survive, but truly live. And if we lose those things, even with warmth and food and air, then perhaps survival is hollow. What do you think? If you were among the last people, deep underground, would you cling to memory of the sun, or build a new life without it? Would you tell your children stories of what was lost, or only stories of what remains? Maybe the answer is not one or the other. Maybe humanity will always carry both. Memory and reinvention, grief and hope. A sunless society would be different, yes, but it would still be ours, still human, still searching for meaning, still filled with voices that sing, even in the dark. And perhaps that is enough. What would happen to time itself if the sun were gone? The hours of our lives are measured not by clocks alone, but by light. Sunrise signals beginnings. Noon stretches long shadows short. Sunset calls us home. Seasons follow one after another, carried by the tilt of earth toward or away from the sun. Without it, what would time mean? Would the minute still matter if there was no dawn to divide one day from the next? Could you imagine living in a world where every moment looks the same, the sky locked in eternal night? At first, of course, we would cling to what we know. Our watches would keep ticking. Our calendars would keep turning. Governments would still announce dates. Schools would still mark semesters. Birthdays would still arrive on paper, even if no longer reflected in the seasons. But over time, would such measures lose their weight? A day means Earth's rotation under the sun. A year means a full orbit around it. Without the sun, those words might sound hollow. Would we still call it morning if nothing rises? Would we still call it evening if nothing sets? I imagine underground cities where time is dictated not by the heavens, but by machines. Lamps brightening to mark waking hours, dimming to signal rest. Bells chiming at intervals to call workers to shifts, families to meals. Artificial cycles replacing natural ones. Could we adapt to such rhythms? Yes, perhaps. But would we ever believe in them the way we once believed in sunlight? Would your body accept the tick of a clock in place of the warmth of dawn? Or would you always feel, deep inside, that something essential was missing? Our very biology is tied to the sun's circadian rhythms. The inner clocks in our cells respond to light. Hormones rise and fall with the day. Sleep depends on darkness, but also on the memory of light before it. Without sunlight, our bodies would drift. Some would sleep too long, others too little. Patterns would unravel. Could we learn to retrain ourselves with artificial cues? Scientists already use lamps to treat disorders of sleep, tricking the body into remembering rhythm. Could entire civilizations live under artificial dawns, their health preserved by carefully engineered cycles of light? And if so, would we slowly evolve into something new, humans no longer bound to the sun, but to machines that mimic it? Then there are the seasons. No more winter, no more spring, no more cycle of harvest and growth. Time would flatten. Would it feel like eternity, endless and unchanging? Or would it feel like loss, the comfort of familiar rhythms slipping away? Think of what would vanish. No autumn leaves, no summer storms, no spring blossoms. Children would never ask when winter will come, never wait for the first snow or the last frost. Festivals tied to planting and harvest would fade. Would people still mark a new year? Or would years lose meaning without the turning of seasons? Perhaps we would invent new calendars. Instead of solstices, we might celebrate reactor anniversaries, geothermal milestones, or great harvests from underground farms. Instead of summer and winter, we might mark light shifts and dark shifts, timed by the lamps in our cities. Could humanity build entirely new rhythms, new rituals, to replace what was lost? Would you celebrate an artificial spring if it came by the flick of a switch? But I wonder, would time feel heavier or lighter without the sun? On one hand, the sameness of eternal night could stretch hours into an unbearable weight. Each day identical, each week indistinguishable, the mind drifting without anchor. But on the other hand, perhaps time would dissolve, freeing us from the pressure of calendars and deadlines. Without the sun's constant reminder, could we learn to live slower, more timeless lives? Would eternity feel like prison or like peace? And what of memory? Generations raised without the sun might lose their sense of its rhythm entirely. For them, day and night might be nothing more than words from old stories. Imagine asking a child to picture morning light and them looking confused, unable to imagine the glow you describe. Would humanity forget the sun not only as a presence, but as a clock? Would time itself become unrecognizable? Our connection to the stars would also shift. Without daylight, the heavens would always be visible, glittering endlessly. Perhaps we would measure time by them instead. Constellations drifting overhead could become new clocks, galaxies the new calendars. The slow passing of comets, the rare explosion of a supernova, the quiet rhythm of planetary orbits. These might replace dawn and dusk as markers of time. Could we learn to measure our days by the turning of the stars instead of the rise of the sun? Would you prefer that? A night sky so rich and constant that it becomes your only measure of change? But how practical would such a system be underground? For those who rarely see the frozen surface, time would remain artificial, dictated by machines and lamps. Would the people of the caverns grow apart from the people who still watch the stars? Would two kinds of time develop, one mechanical, one celestial? Would humanity fracture not by geography, but by rhythm? I think often of how much meaning is hidden in rhythm. Work and rest, birth and aging, holidays and rituals. Without rhythm, we lose not only order, but story. Our lives feel like narratives because time itself has shape, beginnings, middles, endings. Seasons give us arcs. Days give us cycles. Remove them, and life risks becoming a flat line. Would you still feel your life as a story without the sun? Or would it feel like an endless page with no chapters, no punctuation? And yet, perhaps we underestimate our ability to create. Humanity has always made rituals. Even now, we set alarms, schedule days, plan holidays. Perhaps without the sun, we would become even more inventive. We might carve calendars into stone walls underground, paint stars on ceilings, invent artificial dawn festivals. Could humanity not only preserve time, but reimagine it entirely? Wouldn't it be fascinating to see what new traditions might bloom in the dark? Still, the question lingers. Does time itself change without the sun, or only our experience of it? The earth would still spin, It would still orbit the space where the sun once was. Physics would not forget. But to us, living beings, time is not only mechanics. It is sensation, rhythm, memory. Perhaps the sun is not just a star, but a storyteller, giving shape to our lives. Without it, we must learn to tell time ourselves. Could we become the new storytellers of time? So as you lie in the quiet, consider this. How much of your sense of life is bound to the sun? Would you still know who you are when you are, if its rhythm was gone? And if not, could you learn to find new rhythms within yourself? New ways to mark the passage of your own story? Perhaps that is the real question. Not what happens to time when the sun is gone, but what happens to us when we must create time for ourselves. What would happen to our dreams if the sun were gone? Not the dreams of goals or ambition, but the dreams that come when we close our eyes at night. Have you noticed how much they are shaped by light, by warmth, by memory of the world above? We dream of skies, of landscapes, of color. Without the sun, would our inner worlds darken too? Would the imagination of humanity shrink in the dark? Or would it grow brighter to replace what was lost? Sleep itself is guided by the sun. Our circadian rhythms, our patterns of rest, are tuned to its rise and fall. In endless night, sleep would change. Some might sleep too much, curling inward against the cold. Others might lose the rhythm entirely, drifting half awake through cycles dictated by clocks instead of nature. What kind of dreams would come from such sleep? Could a child born in darkness even dream of sunlight? Would you dream of stars if you had never seen the sun? Dreams are more than illusions of the night. They are the place where the unconscious mind works, weaving fragments of memory into meaning. And memory itself is tied to rhythm, to the passage of days. Without the sun, would memory blur? Would dreams become strange collages without anchor, drifting without pattern just as time itself drifts? Or would they become more vivid, more desperate, holding on tightly to what little rhythm is left? I imagine people gathering to share their dreams in a sunless world. Stories told not of weather or harvest, but of visions from the night. Perhaps dreams would replace the lost cycles of the sun, becoming new markers of time. One dream remembered might mean more than 100 days counted. Would society turn to dreams as new guides, new myths? Could humanity live by the light of imagination when sunlight is gone? Children, especially, would carry this burden differently. Born underground, raised by lamps and machines, their dreams might be filled not with blue skies or golden fields, but with tunnels, caverns, glowing fungi. Their imagination would be tuned to their surroundings. Would they believe the stories of sunlight, or would they think of them as fairy tales, like dragons or magic kingdoms? Could you convince a child that the sun once existed, if they had never seen it? And yet, there is something comforting about imagination itself. Humans are builders not only of tools, but of worlds inside their minds. Even without the sun, our inner light would remain. People might paint skies on cavern ceilings, write poems of warmth, compose music that rises like dawn. Dreams might inspire art even more fiercely, as a rebellion against the endless night. Wouldn't it be beautiful to know that imagination can glow even when the world grows cold? But dreams are not only personal. They shape society, too. Civilizations are guided by visions of the future, by what they hope to build. Without the sun, would humanity lose its sense of direction? Would despair close our imagination to possibility? Or would necessity spark new dreams, new inventions, new hopes? Could the greatest dreams of humanity be born in the darkest of times? Think of exploration. With the sun gone, humanity might dream more fiercely of the stars. If our home loses its light, we might look outward for another. Dreams of space travel, of new worlds orbiting distant suns, would no longer be fantasy. They would be survival. Would children born in caverns grow up not to dream of skies, but of rockets? Would the night sky, filled with galaxies, call to them as their only horizon of hope? Could the loss of our sun drive us more urgently toward the stars? And what of faith? Dreams have always mingled with belief. Prophets claim visions, cultures weave myths from sleep. Without the sun, might dreams become sacred again, guiding communities with symbols and stories? One person's vision could become a shared ritual, a new kind of compass. Would we turn inward, letting the unconscious mind replace the rhythms of the sky? Would humanity begin to live by dream instead of day? There's another angle to this. Survival itself would depend on imagination. Farming without sunlight, breathing without forests, warming cities with geothermal fire. All of this requires not only science, but vision. Someone must first dream of it before it becomes real. Wouldn't it be true, then, that imagination becomes the most important resource in a sunless world? More precious even than food, because without it there can be no future? Would you guard your imagination like treasure if it meant survival? I think, too, about art as collective dreaming. Even in the darkest times of history, humans painted, sang, danced. In caves tens of thousands of years ago, people drew animals on stone walls by firelight. Perhaps in the darkness of a sunless earth, art would bloom again, painted on cavern ceilings, stories carved into rock. Would people draw the sun again and again, unable to forget? Or would they paint new symbols, glowing vents, underground rivers, constellations that guide them now? What images would a sunless humanity leave behind for the future to find? But there is also danger in dreams. Without the anchor of reality, imagination can twist. Fear and despair can shape nightmares that ripple through entire communities. Rumors, myths of doom, false hopes, these too could spread. In endless night, how would we know which dreams to trust? Would we learn to guard against our own imaginations, balancing them carefully with reason? Or would humanity surrender to visions, living more in dream than in waking? Perhaps there would be a merging of both, dreams and science entwined. A dream might inspire an invention, an idea for a new way to grow food or harness power. Science might test it, refine it, make it real. In that sense, dreams could become the foundation of survival itself. Could imagination become the sun we carry inside, guiding us when the real one is gone? And yet, I return to the quiet, personal level. To you, lying in the dark, listening, perhaps drifting toward sleep. What would it mean for your own dreams if you never saw the sun again? Would you long for it, recreating its light in visions each night? Or would your dreams change, becoming strange and unfamiliar, shaped by the world you inhabit? Would you be comforted by your dreams, or haunted by them? Maybe that is humanity's greatest resilience, the ability to dream, no matter the darkness. We have done it before, through wars, through winters, through loss. Even in the most difficult times, people have imagined better worlds. Perhaps in the absence of the sun, we would lean on that gift more than ever. Dreams, both personal and collective, might become the true hearth of humanity, keeping our spirits alive when light is gone. So perhaps the question is not whether humanity can dream without the sun, but whether dreams can become our new light. Could imagination itself be the star we follow? What would happen to hope if the sun disappeared? We talk about heat, about food, about breath, but survival is not made of those things alone. Something else, something less tangible, keeps people moving forward. Without it, even the warmest fire and the fullest stomach cannot save us. What would become of that quiet force we call hope in a world where the sky has gone dark? Would it fade with the light, or glow brighter, like embers refusing to die? Hope is tied to horizons. You see a sunrise and feel tomorrow. You see fields in bloom and imagine harvest. You watch children play and picture futures yet to come. Without the sun, those horizons collapse. The days no longer promise return. Fields no longer promise food. Children are raised in caverns, under lamps instead of skies. Would hope survive without the sun to set it against? Or would it take new shapes, built from what remains? Perhaps hope would turn inward. People might stop dreaming of distant futures and learn instead to find meaning in small moments. The warmth of a meal, the comfort of shared laughter, the survival of one more day. Would hope shrink to fit the dark, like a flame shielded against the wind? Or would it grow sharper, fiercer, precisely because it must? Would you find more hope in the little things if the greater horizon was gone? I imagine communities gathering not for festivals of light or harvest, but for ceremonies of survival. Each year, perhaps, they mark the day their city endured another cycle without the sun. A child born underground might be celebrated not just as life, but as defiance against extinction. In this way, hope would shift. It would become not about endless possibility, but about stubborn endurance. Would such a hope feel smaller or stronger? There is another form of hope, though, the hope of discovery. Humanity has always been restless, reaching for more. If the sun were gone, that restlessness might burn even hotter. Some would look outward, toward the stars. They would dream not of surviving on Earth forever, but of finding another home. Would the night sky, glittering with galaxies, become our new horizon of hope? Would children grow up pointing not to the east where the sun once rose, but to distant constellations, saying, "Our future is there"? This raises another question. Could we, in the absence of the sun, build our own light? Nuclear energy, geothermal fire, artificial suns. Already, scientists play with fusion, the dream of replicating the star that warms us. Perhaps in losing the sun, hope would turn toward invention, not waiting for a miracle, but building one. Would hope itself become an engineering project? Would we measure it in watts and reactors instead of in dreams of dawn? Yet, hope is fragile. In the dark, despair lurks easily. The absence of sunlight could weigh heavily on minds. Depression might spread, societies might fracture, people might lose the will to endure. Could hope truly hold against the endless night? Perhaps the answer lies not in individuals, but in community. Alone, a person may falter. Together, people may lift each other. Shared rituals, shared stories, shared goals. These could become the scaffolding of hope when the sun is gone. Wouldn't you lean more on others if the horizon itself had vanished? There's something else to consider. What if hope no longer meant survival at all, but transformation? The earth without the sun would not be the same world. Its people would not be the same humans. Perhaps hope would not mean clinging to the past, but embracing what we could become. Pale-skinned, cave-dwelling, technologically bound, yet still alive, still human in spirit. Would you find hope in becoming something different, even if it meant letting go of what we once were? I think of myths here. Humans have always told stories of rebirth after darkness, phoenixes rising from ash, dawn breaking after long nights, life continuing after death. Maybe, in losing the sun, we would lean more than ever on such stories. Maybe hope would be carried through myth, giving meaning to the unthinkable. Would hope in the dark look less like science and more like story? Could we learn to believe in survival through the poetry of it, not just the physics? And yet, perhaps the greatest hope would come not from memory or invention, but from imagination of what lies beyond. The sun has always made us feel central, its light defining our days, its heat sustaining our food. But what if, in losing it, we realize we are not bound to just one star? Perhaps hope would come from knowing that stars are countless, and that the death of one does not mean the death of possibility. Would you feel comfort, lying in darkness, knowing that somewhere else, another dawn is always rising? Hope may even grow deeper in the dark. Light makes it easy. You look at the sun, and hope feels natural. But in shadow, hope becomes a choice. It becomes defiance. It becomes something created, not given. Wouldn't that make it more powerful? Wouldn't it mean that hope itself becomes the sun within us, carried forward no matter the sky? I picture it now. Families gathered underground, telling children stories of the sun not as loss, but as gift. It gave us life for billions of years, they might say, and now it gives us the chance to become something new. The story shifts from mourning to gratitude, from despair to legacy. Could hope be reborn not in longing, but in thankfulness for what once was? And maybe that is the answer. Hope is not static. It changes with circumstance. With the sun, it lived in horizons and seasons. Without it, it would live in endurance, in invention, in community, in imagination. Hope is not bound to light. It is bound to life. Wouldn't it be comforting to know that even if the sun were gone, hope would still find a way to shine? So tonight, ask yourself, where does your own hope live? Is it in the promise of tomorrow's sunrise, or in the small joys you carry even now? If the sun were gone, could you still find it? In laughter, in memory, in love, in the simple act of surviving another day? Perhaps the greatest truth is this. The sun may vanish, but hope does not have to, because hope, like life, is more resilient than we think. What would it mean for Earth to drift alone through the universe? Without the sun, Our planet would no longer orbit anything. Gravity would no longer tie us to a star. Earth would sail outward, into the galaxy, a wanderer with no destination. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to live on a world that is no longer anchored, but adrift? Would Earth seem less like a planet and more like a ship, its people passengers on a voyage they never chose? Astronomers already imagine such worlds. They call them rogue planets, planets flung from their stars, drifting alone in the dark between galaxies. Some may be larger than Earth, some smaller, but all share one trait. They are lonely. No sunrise, no seasons, no orbit, just endless night, punctuated by distant stars. Could Earth, stripped of its sun, become one of them? And if so, could we learn to see ourselves not as victims of loss, but as voyagers among the stars? Think of it. A world sailing silently, carrying oceans beneath ice, carrying cities beneath stone, carrying billions of memories of what once was. No engine, no sails, just momentum, the last gift of orbit, propelling us through the void. Would we feel trapped on such a journey, or awed by the vastness of it? Would you feel terror at the thought of infinite night, or wonder, knowing that Earth itself had become an explorer? On the surface, frozen and silent, the stars would blaze. With no sun to dim them, the sky would be impossibly rich, galaxies stretching like rivers across the black. Would people venture above the ice just to see it, to remind themselves that though their sun was gone, the universe was still full of light? Would the stars become our new compass, our new home? But drifting also means danger. Without the sun, the Earth would be vulnerable. Radiation from distant sources would sweep unshielded. Meteors would strike more often, unchecked by the sun's protective gravity. Comets might cross our path without warning. Survival underground would not just be about warmth. It would be about protection from the vastness of space itself. Could we build our homes strong enough to withstand a universe that suddenly feels more hostile? Would you still step outside, knowing the sky above no longer shields you? And yet, drifting does not mean stillness. Earth's molten heart would keep turning. Its magnetic field might still protect us. Its oceans might still stir beneath ice. Its life might still cling to vents and caverns. Even as a rogue planet, Earth would remain alive. Isn't that astonishing, to imagine our world glowing within, even while it sails dark through the cosmos? Some scientists believe rogue planets might even carry atmospheres and warmth, if they are large enough. Jupiter-sized giants may hold onto hydrogen blankets that trap heat, keeping oceans liquid for billions of years. Could Earth, smaller but still fiery inside, manage the same? Could our atmosphere linger, thin but protective, shielding us as we travel star to star? Would Earth, even in exile, still cradle us as home? And what of humanity's imagination? If we saw ourselves as voyagers, as passengers on a drifting ship, would it change how we lived? Perhaps cultures would shift toward navigation, astronomy, orientation. Maps of the galaxy might replace maps of nations. People might measure their identity not by land or country, but by their shared journey through space. Would you find pride in being not just Earthling, but passenger of a rogue world? Wouldn't that be a story worth telling? Humanity, carried by a wandering planet, still alive among the stars? But drifting also raises a haunting question. Would Earth ever find another star? The galaxy is wide, and stars are countless. Might our planet, sailing over millions of years, eventually pass close enough to another sun to be caught in its gravity? Could Earth begin a second life, orbiting a new star, warmed once more, skies reborn? What would it feel like to wake one day and see light return? Not artificial, not engineered, but true dawn. Would we rejoice or fear it, having grown so used to the dark? Such a meeting is improbable, astronomers say. The distances are too great, the odds too slim, but improbable is not impossible. And hope, as we know, thrives even in long odds. Could humanity sustain itself for the eons it would take, holding on long enough to see Earth captured by another sun? Would that waiting itself become our greatest story? Even if no star claimed us, drifting through the galaxy might connect us with other worlds. Perhaps Earth, sailing silently, would pass close enough to alien systems for our signals to be heard, our presence to be noticed. Could exile become encounter? Might humanity, starless and wandering, still find companionship in the cosmos? And if not, if we sailed alone forever, would that loneliness be unbearable? Or would it teach us to look inward, to find enough meaning in our own planet, our own lives, our own stories? Wouldn't it be remarkable to realize that Earth, though adrift, still carries everything we need to be human? I think about perspective here. To live on Earth as a rogue planet would mean constantly remembering our place in the galaxy. No longer central, no longer guided, but small, moving, searching. Perhaps the humility would change us. Perhaps wars would lessen, divisions would fade. As we recognized how fragile and rare our drifting home truly is, would humanity finally learn unity when stripped of its sun? Or would we still find ways to divide, even in the dark? There is poetry in imagining Earth as a ship. The ice above becomes our hull. The heat within becomes our engine. The stars outside become our map. Humanity becomes its crew, sometimes quarreling, sometimes united, always bound together by the same vessel. Would you feel safer thinking of Earth that way? Not as a lost world, but as a ship carrying us on an endless voyage? Wouldn't that make the darkness feel less lonely? But voyages must be guided. Could we ever steer Earth? Some dreamers imagine engines so vast they could shift a planet's course. Others imagine harnessing gravity itself, using close encounters with stars to slingshot Earth on new paths. If we became masters of such feats, we could aim our drifting world, not let it wander. Wouldn't it be extraordinary to navigate Earth itself like a spacecraft, choosing our star, our future? And if that were possible, would you choose to settle again under a sun, or continue drifting, exploring the galaxy forever? The thought leaves me quiet. On one hand, the sun is our anchor, our giver, our guide. Without it, we seem lost. But perhaps being lost is not the same as being doomed. Perhaps drifting is simply another way of traveling, another chapter in Earth's story. Could exile be reimagined as adventure? Could loneliness be reimagined as freedom? And so I wonder, if you looked up at the black sky, saw the stars burning clear, and remembered your planet was sailing among them, would you feel fear or awe? Would you mourn the sun forever, or learn to see beauty in the voyage? Perhaps both. Perhaps that is the true answer. Loss and wonder, grief and hope, carried together as Earth drifts, endlessly alive in the dark. What does it truly mean for life to endure? Is survival only the clinging of bodies to warmth, the eating of food, the breathing of air? Or is it something greater, something less tangible, a fire that flickers in spirit as much as in flesh? If the sun disappeared, leaving Earth adrift in cold and dark, what would matter most? The mechanics of living, or the meaning of it? Could we still call it life if we saved the body but lost the soul? Through all our questions, about heat, about food, about breath, about time, there has always been another question hidden beneath them. Why do we want to survive at all? What is it that compels us to resist the cold, to defy the dark, to imagine futures even when the present feels impossible? Is it instinct? Is it hope? Or is it love? Imagine humanity, gathered deep within caverns, lit by artificial lamps, fed by mushrooms and algae, warmed by geothermal vents. Generations born without sunlight, never seeing a dawn, never feeling the kiss of warmth on skin. And yet, still laughing, still singing, still telling stories. Wouldn't that prove that life is not just about the sun, but about something carried within us? Would you believe, then, that the sun's loss is not the end of life, but the unveiling of its resilience? Perhaps survival is not about clinging to the old world, but about creating a new one. A world of artificial skies and cavern cities, of rituals that honor air and warmth, of myths that speak not of dawn but of the Earth's hidden fire. Would such a world feel like a pale imitation of the one we lost, or a genuine continuation? Different, yes, but still alive, still human? Could you learn to love a future shaped not by sunlight, but by the creativity of survival? There is something humbling in imagining this. We think of the sun as eternal, as the anchor of all that we are. And yet, in its absence, life still finds ways. In deep oceans around hydrothermal vents, in ice-sealed lakes, in underground chambers, life persists, patient and adaptable. If Earth teaches us anything, it is that survival does not belong only to the light. Could humanity, too, join that chorus of resilience, proving that our place in the universe is not tied to any single star? But endurance is not only physical. It is also emotional. Darkness, silence, the absence of the familiar, all of these weigh heavily. Could we carry the memory of the sun without being crushed by it? Could we grieve its loss while still finding joy in what remains? Would you choose to remember or to forget? Perhaps the truth lies in balance. Memory keeps us grateful. Imagination keeps us moving forward. Together, they allow us to endure. And then there is the question of meaning. If the sun is gone, what story do we tell ourselves? Once, we were children of a star. Our myths, our science, our very calendars were tied to it. Without it, are we adrift not only physically, but spiritually? Or could we learn to tell a new story, one where life is not bound to light, but to persistence itself? Wouldn't it be powerful to imagine humanity as keepers of an inner flame, carrying the sun within even when the sky has gone dark? Perhaps that is what it all comes down to, carrying light within. Even now, in the comfort of a sunlit world, our greatest moments are not measured in degrees of warmth or watts of power, but in sparks of kindness, love, imagination, and wonder. These are lights that do not fade when the sun does. These are fires that burn even in caverns. If the sun disappeared, wouldn't we learn, at last, that true survival is not the endurance of the planet, but the endurance of those lights inside us? And maybe, just maybe, the universe would notice. Perhaps other civilizations, too, live on worlds that drift without stars. Perhaps they, too, carry lights within. Perhaps the galaxy is filled not only with blazing suns, but with tiny embers, societies glowing quietly in the dark, surviving not because of their stars, but in spite of their absence. Could Earth become one of them, a member of that hidden community of persistence? Wouldn't it be comforting to think that even in exile, we are not alone? But even if we are alone, the journey still matters. To drift through space, carrying life, carrying memory, carrying hope, that is not nothing. That is extraordinary. Earth, the wanderer, humanity, the flamekeeper, the story of life continuing, even when its great star is gone. Would you not find awe in being part of such a story? So what does it mean for life to endure? It means adaptation. It means memory. It means imagination. It means hope, even when hope feels impossible. It means choosing to see beauty in mushrooms grown in caverns, in children's laughter echoing through stone, in artificial dawns painted on ceilings. It means carrying forward the sun in our hearts, even when the sky is dark. And so, the final question, could darkness, instead of ending us, become our beginning? If the sun vanished tomorrow, Earth would change. Life would change. Humanity would change. But change is not the same as death. Perhaps the end of the sun would not be the end of our story, but simply the turning of a page. Couldn't it be that the greatest lesson of imagining a sunless Earth is realizing that life is not as fragile as we fear, nor as simple as we think? That life, in its deepest sense, is not bound to stars, but to the quiet, stubborn will to continue? And maybe, when you close your eyes tonight, you'll feel it, that same stubborn flame inside you. The one that has carried life through ice ages and extinctions, through silence and shadow, through grief and loss. The one that will carry us, too, even if the sun is gone. The flame of endurance, the flame of meaning, the flame of life itself. And isn't that, in the end, the truest light of all?